In the early 1920s, among the top 5% of professions for women, one that was considered prestigious, especially for impoverished young girls, was clock face painting. A clock face, a small cup of water for rinsing the brush, and a magical glowing jar of paint were all they needed on a dark night. These beautiful young girls dipped their brushes into the water and painted, then delicately licked the tip of the brush before skillfully applying the enchanting paint onto the clock face. They worked at this all day long, with the paint, their mouths, and the clock faces repeating and repeating. But these girls were unaware that only a few years later, dozens of them would begin to slowly die, ravaged by the most horrifying illnesses imaginable. Their teeth would fall out, their jaws would shatter at the slightest touch, and their legs would break with the slightest step. Afterwards, even though they were buried deep under 3 feet of soil, their skeletons continued to emit a mysterious green light for over 1,600 years. The world would come to fear them, calling them the Radium Girls. One young and beautiful girl, only 15 years old, strolled through the factory where she had just been hired to paint clock faces. What made this job special was that it involved a paint containing radium, a newly discovered radioactive element by Madame Marie Curie, less than 20 years earlier. This paint made the clock dials glow magically without the need for sunlight. People even said that it could cure all kinds of ailments. It sounded like magic. The young and innocent girl used this radiant paint to color her lips, cheeks, and nails. She believed it was a miraculous substance. When these girls returned home in the evening, they looked like radiant angels glowing in the darkness. But life is never that simple. The beautiful girl started experiencing excruciating headaches. Her teeth ached, and one night she felt unwell. She brushed it off as a minor discomfort until one of her teeth fell out. Then another and another. In just a week, most of her teeth had fallen out, and her facial skin started to peel. Even her jaw was riddled with holes. 2 weeks later, our beautiful girl had passed away. And welcome everyone to one of the worst nightmares in American history. Radium, discovered by Nobel laureate Marie Curie and her husband Pierre Curie in 1898, was quickly utilized in a cancer treatment therapy. As it proved successful, radium became a powerful elixir, akin to the dietary supplements we use today. Humanity was entranced by its potency, and during that time, there was a craze for radium, as this radioactive material found its way into a myriad of everyday products, from toothpaste to cosmetics, and even food and drinks. One such manufacturer was Rainto, a nefarious operator who went as far as adding small amounts of radium to drinking water, advertising it as a miraculous rejuvenating elixir, promising to cure a plethora of ailments, from erectile dysfunction, ED, to asthma to gout. They claimed, if you don't know, you have no defense, but the deaths of thousands of people due to the ignorance of a few individuals cannot be excused. One of the most infamous victims of radium, do you find this picture familiar? Because it's been used quite a lot on YouTube, yes. Allow me to introduce you to Eben Byers, the millionaire, sportsman and U.S. golf champion, a devout believer in radium. He consumed over 1,400 bottles of RADIUM, a product containing radium, and it severely damaged his cells and bones from the inside. Before his death, his lower jaw and chin had disintegrated, with only 2 protruding teeth from a bone fragment under his nose. There were even holes in his skull, exposing his brain. Did you know about Madame Curie's notebook, a truly cursed object of science, which will remain radioactive for another 1,600 years until 3343? Marie Curie died in 1934 from aplastic anemia, a condition resulting from prolonged exposure to radium and polonium. She never suspected her experiments were harmful and unwittingly contaminated her entire household, along with her personal belongings. She often carried samples of radium and polonium in her pockets and her lab coat, taking them home for analysis in her spare time. This inadvertently contaminated all her clothes, books, cookware, jewelry, and various personal items. It was later determined that her lab notebook was contaminated with radium-226, the most toxic form. The understanding at the time was limited, and now, let's return to the young girls working in our paint factory. These girls believed radium was beneficial for their health, as many people worldwide did. Europeans used it as a luminous paint for children's rooms. Swiss artists used radium paint in their artwork, and their radiant appearance was recognizable even in the darkest classrooms. Many things were painted with radium signs, such as alarm clocks, theater seats, fishing lures, and nearly anything that people believed could benefit from its glow. By 1925, the United States Radium Corporation was established in New York City. They decided to create a new type of paint named Undark. This paint had a specific demand, especially during the onset of World War I, when soldiers found themselves in dark trenches. The need to read their watches became a matter of life and death, as only a dimly lit watch could be used to check the time. This situation posed a significant risk to their lives. Another company, the Radium Dial Company, formed during the same period, focused on civilian use, making radium-based paint for various purposes. In the early 1930s, the radium dial industry employed over 1,000 young women who painted around 4,300 watch dials that glowed in the dark each day. They believed that the younger the girls, the better, as their small and agile hands were perfect for the intricate work of painting clock faces. Some were even as young as 11 when they started working. This was indeed an attractive job. It was gentle, well-paying, and seemingly safe. Many girls even convinced their families to join them to sweep the factory floor or handle the delicate watch hands. The girls were instructed to shake the paintbrushes with their lips and were assured that the paint was entirely safe. However, it was through this seemingly harmless practice that radium gradually entered their bodies, bit by bit. The radium girls began to believe they were becoming healthier, thanks to working with a new wonder substance, the most valuable material in the world at that time, worth the equivalent of $2 million per gram in today's value. They were even likened to artists, contributing to the creation of luxurious, high-end, and sparkling watches. But the good times didn't last long. By 1922, the first victim emerged, a young worker named Molly Maggia, just 22 years old. She had to stop working due to illness. Initially, Molly had toothaches, and after her dentist removed the first painful tooth, the next one began to hurt and was subsequently removed as well. But from the empty sockets of the removed teeth, strange growths started to sprout. They looked like dull-colored, dimly glowing flowers inside her mouth, with shades of red and yellow from blood and pus. These growths developed rapidly, causing her breath to become increasingly foul and unpleasant. Soon, Molly began to experience agonizing pain in her legs, rendering her unable to walk. On September 12, 1922, Molly Maggia found herself in a desperate situation. She had lost most of her jawbone as a result of the insidious infection spreading throughout her mouth. The infection had reached her lower jawbone and even the tiny ear canal bones. However, the worst was yet to come. It wasn't until a dentist gently tapped on her jawbone, horrifyingly witnessing it shatter under his touch, that the true extent of her affliction became apparent. Yes, her jawbone literally disintegrated. The dentist simply used his fingers to scoop out the bone shards from her mouth. Just a few days later, on September 12, 1922, Maury succumbed to severe hemorrhaging, barely 24 years old. Do you know what's ironic? The doctors and the company she worked for had the audacity to record on her death certificate that she had died of syphilis. Things took a grim turn for the radium girls. Some developed spinal tumors, while others faced skin cancer. Suddenly, they had eye issues, throat cancer, and a plethora of symptoms from radium exposure over an extended period. Some lost their teeth or all their hair. Can you believe it? They were essentially licking paint, ingesting radium, and swallowing it day after day, working at their watch company for hundreds of days. But you know what the bitter irony is? Every death certificate for these radium girls listed the cause of death as syphilis. The company shamelessly shirked responsibility, and this caused extreme outrage among the victims and their families. Legal battles ensued, and news of the horrifying Radium Girl story spread worldwide. It wasn't until 1925, when a doctor named Harry Solomon got involved, performed autopsies on Molly Magia and others, that the truth was revealed. Radium itself had poisoned these girls. In Radium's world, money was everything. A few years later, in 1928, a major breakthrough occurred. At last, the true dangers of radium were recognized more comprehensively. Techniques like lip pointing, used to apply radium paint, were banned, and luminescent watchmakers were equipped with protective gear. But sadly, the story doesn't end there. It would take another decade, until 1939, for surviving victims to receive compensation, and death certificates finally listed the true cause of death for the departed. Radium luminous paint was also phased out of use in watches since 1968. With a half-life of 1,600 years, once radium enters the human body, it remains there indefinitely. Can you believe it? With Marie Curie's notebook, Yvette Bayer's radium charge book, and the radium girl Molly Magia, all safely protected in museums or buried deep underground, they still emit eerie green luminescence and radioactive decay for another 1,600 years. It's truly hazardous. And if discovering the terrifying nature of radiation still keeps you intrigued, we invite you to stay tuned for more. The 4 individuals who endured the heaviest radiation exposure in the world are now appearing on the screen right here. Click on it and watch immediately, my friends.